Before I want to get started, I do want to thank my committee members who helped plan and organize this discussion. Today, we're going to be listening to Kenya Flash, who is the diversity librarian, and Kelly Tilton, who is the instruction librarian at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And they're going to be leading our discussion on the aligning to the framework. This session will be recorded, and then I'll be sending out a link to the recording, and I'll also be sending out a survey so you can provide us with feedback on this. So I won't take up any more time, and I will turn it over to Kenya and Kelly to get our discussion going. Thanks for everybody for attending and participating.
Hello, everyone. This is Kenya. We're about to get started. I just wanted to thank you for joining in. And we're just going to go over a few of the details that, just some of the things that we've noticed as we've tried to align with the framework. And so what we're going to be doing first is just going over the way that we understand the framework and how we apply it. And then we're going to be asking you questions about how you use the framework, if you use the framework, and what issues you're finding. Can you hear me? Hello? Wonderful. Okay, so I'm not sure if everyone here has been paying attention to the ACRL frame mailing list. For me personally, I've noticed that there's been a lot of information about the framework. And so trying to put it into context in what we do here and how to understand it in terms of how to make it applicable has been a little confusing. I'm not sure if that's shared by everyone, but it has been a little confusing because you see details about how to use it literally as it is, and then you see information on how to use it formally or use it as a theoretical document. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is try to figure out how it actually works for us. And so some of the readings that I provided today refer to the framework as a social practice. And so that idea of social practice led to an understanding about using the framework not necessarily as it's written, but as a philosophy, as just a way of a goal that we want to end up reaching. We want the students to reach at the end of our sessions. And so we use it to inform how we develop our instruction and how we end up providing instruction. And so some of the questions we ended up asking ourselves were, what guides our thinking? How do we engage students and make sure they're critical? And some of the things that we're finding as we're trying to use the framework is the fact that you have to incorporate prior student knowledge. You have to find a way to engage students, and the framework helps us to do that because it incorporates the idea of context. Another thing that we found is that we still need standards. We still need a way to assess how it's working, because while using it as a philosophy, that's a huge idea. And so to have the nitty-gritty details, we still need the standards. And so we still are using the ACRL standards that were provided to us, but we're using the framework to help instruct the way that we think about the instruction that we're providing. And some of the things that we found and I think if you use the framework as a philosophy, in general, you'll be finding this as well. Your instruction technique may not completely change. it may seem the same, but you may actually see more engagement by the students because you're trying to reach them in a way that incorporates context and incorporates their previous understanding. Another thing is that you're not always going to use all the frames. You're going to use some of the frames. You're going to try and get students through some of the frames or some of the thresholds, but it's not going to be all 6. And then the other thing is there's increased collaboration that you have to do to ensure that not only are you hitting these ideas within each session that you're presenting, but also that you're hitting these ideas throughout the student's program. So that's increased collaboration with other librarians, but also by sharing the framework as a philosophy, you are also able to engage instructors outside of the library profession. Okay, so that's my quick overview of how we view the framework and how we're using it. Kelly is going to give you a few more details about how we use it practically.
All right, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Or should I be louder? Okay, I see some yeses. All right, great. Thank you. Okay, so I just want to push this button. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our instruction environment here at UT. We are a large research library, and so we have right now about 6 to 8 instructors for just the Gen Ed classes at UT per semester. And when I say Gen Ed, I mean English 101, 102, FYS, First Year Studies, and also some communication classes, communication studies. These instructors include 1 graduate student who's helping us out, and then additional instructors who either rotate on a rotating schedule or they come in when they're needed and they're not full-time instructors. Okay, so the instruction program here, I know this is different from some libraries. We have mainly one-shot instruction here. We're not embedded, and they're usually in person. Now, we started developing towards a flipped classroom in some cases, but right now we're mostly in person. There was an environment shift about 5 years ago when the standards came out, and the person in charge of instruction at that point started developing consistent outcomes for the Gen Ed classes across the program, and she also started working really hard on developing assessment. And this included a short survey at the end of each English 101 or 102 instruction session. And then, of course, we had an increase in the number of instructors after that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the successes that we've had implementing the framework. And, you know, when I say the framework, there's also going to be some successes we've had with the standards. And this is by no means all of them, and I am covering both individual instructor successes as well as program-wide. So that's just the caveat I'm going to stick on there. So we've added additional specialized faculty, so the students have more of a chance of getting instruction over their careers as students here. So for example, we've got the first-year programs. We've got a librarian who focuses on transfer students, non-traditional students like student veterans, service learning initiatives, and then we've got a librarian that focuses mainly on international students. We've also developed, okay, so I see a question in the chat. Kenya, could you make a note of that, please? All right, so we've developed some formative assessment practices specifically for English 101 and 102. And then, of course, we have some assessment practices in the FYS and other instruction sessions. And these can be anywhere from informal assessment practices, so a teacher stopping to see whether the students are following her or not, all the way to a short survey for the English classes. Then, of course, the development of consistent outcomes. Now, can you talk a little bit about how the framework differs from the standards? In this case, outcomes were based on the standards, and we've adjusted them for our specific program. And of course, the framework does not have outcomes included, it's just the dispositions. So these are based on the standards. We also have meetings outside of the classroom with students for something like Library Takeout, which is a program that was started last year by one of our librarians, where she'll go to events for specific groups across campus and talk about some of the things that are involved with the library, things that they want to talk about, things that they need help with. We also show up at orientations, community outreach, and things like that. Okay, let's see. Okay, and specifically, recently, I've started developing a survey specifically for English 101 and 102 to acquire a better understanding of which instructors here in the English program use library instruction and which ones don't and why. And there's also some questions about the benefits they're seeing in their students, the progress their students are making after library instruction, whether they are progressing or not, how they're progressing, because we're not embedded librarians and we don't have a full course for library instruction. We need the instructors or the faculty outside of the library to work with us on this. So, all right, and then we have recently increased regular discussions to help with communication across the program and discuss student learning. And by this, I mean more communication between librarians here, but also more open communication with faculty outside the library. All right, and we can talk a little bit more about successes that you guys have had in a bit. And now the challenges, and of course this is not going to be all the challenges, but because we are a large research institution, it's sometimes difficult to interest professors and lecturers in information literacy outside the subject. And by this I mean sometimes they don't even know the resources that the library has, and so it's a continual outreach program, especially with new faculty or older faculty who don't know about our new services. So introduction of graduate teaching associates and adjuncts. We try to reach out to orientations, pedagogy workshops, etc. And then, of course, we do go to the student orientations and tours to try to talk to them about library instruction. We're also having difficulties building literacy at all levels. So what I'm saying, like, for example, this is true of colleges all across the country. If a student takes AP credit for their composition classes, they can just skip them. And so they miss some of the basic instruction that we have at that level. And this can continue throughout. There's gaps everywhere, and so you won't have every student have a consistent path through their literacy. And so we get to where even graduate students don't know how to do research, and the professors who expect them to know how to do research are seeing the problems there. And, you know, of course, graduate students coming from other universities who may not have the same programs we do. Communication between librarians and faculty is always sort of an issue, I think. And so we try to really emphasize liaison participation and outreach for instruction so that the faculty know that we're here and then we provide these services. And then we're looking into developing a platform for reflection, assessment, and growth among the librarians here. So a consistent way for us to be able to talk about our experiences and reflect on how the program's going. Okay? All right. So we're going to discuss with you guys all of these things, and I'm going to open it for discussion to the entire, so we can talk about it together. But before we move on to the discussion, any questions about what we've said so far? And let me see if I can find that question from before. Okay, so I've got a question here that says, when you say graduate student is involved, is that allowed? Okay, yeah. So we have an SIS program here at UT. We have the Information Sciences program. And so she's actually a graduate student from the SIS program. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Hold on just a second. Let me see. All right, I'm not sure how the framework has impacted any of those activities. Kitty, you want to grab that one, or do you want me to?
You grab it, and I will fill in.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. And so when we talk about the framework impacting these activities, what we're talking about is the philosophy behind what we're doing. We use the frames. So when I go to, for example, when I'm developing a class, you cannot cover all the frames in one class, and of course we can't see the development of student activity over their literacy path. But what we can do is do some, like, develop the outcomes and assessment based on the standards and the framework, the dispositions that we see there. And then we can also talk about, with the instructors, the faculty instructors outside the library, and we can check in on how their students are developing with library instruction. And so we could talk to them about the frames and the dispositions and how their students are developing. Does that make sense? I think there was a question from Anne, or should I be more specific? Or Kenya, if you have anything to add?
I'm
going to start.
No, I think we covered it.
Everybody's chat here.
Okay, and Anne said thank you. But when we speak about introducing graduate teaching associates, the question is, do we do a special workshop or session for them?
Okay, great.
From my
answer for Liz, or do you want me to answer first? Kenya, sorry.
No, it's okay. From my understanding, we try to go to the graduate teaching, there's an orientation for them. And so I know that we do that, as well as try to work with our mentors to let them know that we are. Am I answering that question to satisfactorily?
Adrienne, also I'd like to add that for example, for the English 101 and 102, we have graduate teaching associates that usually teach those classes. And for example, this semester I'm going into their pedagogy class that's required for those students before they teach. They have to take a pedagogy class. I go to the class and I talk to them about library instruction in addition to the orientations. Does that answer your question? Yes, mainly. We also have, actually, we do have workshops for different levels of graduate students. That's not always particularly aimed at the teaching associates, just graduate students in general. All right, I see a question. How many gen ed sessions do you do a semester? Interesting. Let me think. How many did we have last semester? Do you remember?
I think, I'm not certain, actually. I think
we did about 36 or 37, and that's just me. And then we had the first studies classes and comp studies. Goodness.
Yeah, so I would, yeah, I'd say at least 100, easily.
Okay, let's see. The framework. Okay.
So,
do you see another question you want to?
I can hit this one. The framework does include knowledge practices in addition to dispositions. Did they impact your outcomes? And so at the moment we're growing with that. So our original outcomes were based on the standards. And so we haven't currently changed those yet. What we've done is assessed how closely we're meeting the knowledge practices within the framework by still using some of the outcomes from the standards. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay. The next one, which specific frames do you focus on? Okay, well that will depend on, first, the class that we're talking about, and depend on what level this student is at, if that makes sense. Because you can't cover all the frames. I mean, there's just, and there's no way again for us to, what? Sorry.
Oh, I think it's just not possible.
Yeah, it's just not possible.
No, go ahead.
And so it really depends on the individual class. So for each class, I'll go over and I'll look at the frames and see, and ask the instructor what they want to focus on.
Okay, Kelly, the next question is all you. Dan is asking that you've created surveys to find out which faculty in the department are using or not using library instruction, and why. How are you sending the survey? Email, SurveyMonkey, or LibSurvey?
All right, it's a survey. It's developed in SurveyMonkey, and then that specific program, they have a listserv for all the instructors and the graduate teaching associates, as well as just adjunct faculty. And so I send it to the listserv.
Okay.
Let's see. What's the next question? Do you see one?
Yes, it's by Catherine. She's asking if we've noticed or assessed a difference in outcomes when utilizing the framework, especially for transfers. And that one's a bit more complicated. If you give us a moment with that question, Catherine. What I can say regarding working with transfers, we are still working on our outcomes with that at the moment, primarily because not only do we have a significant transfer population, but in Tennessee it's about to grow even more. And so there are some differences, but I think for the most part we're currently utilizing the same outcomes as we use for first-year students. And Kelly, you can let me know if I'm wrong about that. Hello? Can everyone hear? Sorry about that.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
There you are.
Okay. All right, so when we're talking about transfer students, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, yes. We don't have our specialist here with us, which she'll be able to answer this question, but I think it is the same. I don't think there's any variation, but I wouldn't know. I would have to ask. So I wish you were here. All right, next question. Okay, for gen ed, is it comm classes or are you in classes in other subject areas? That's a good question. It varies a little bit. We have the English basic composition classes, and then we have comm studies classes, and then we have first year studies classes, and then we do have some writing classes that are subject area specific, but that really comes down to the faculty member's preference. We don't plan for those at the beginning of each semester. Okay. I'm just going to start answering these questions, Kenya. Jump in when you want to.
No worries. I got lost somewhere in the chat, so.
Fine. Yeah, keep looking. I'm just going to, in regard to the specialists, do they have special open houses or workshops for these populations, or how does that work? Okay. Yes, for those things, all of those things. The different, when one of our gen ed librarians works with a specific group, they do have things that they do outside of the classes, and these do include open houses, workshops, all of those things. And they usually work with a program. For example, we have the International Student Program that one of our librarians works very closely with, and she does all of that. Okay. Challenges. What challenges do you encounter when implementing the framework? They were unique to the framework, not just instructional challenges. I don't know if I can really distinguish those things very well. When we're talking about the framework, especially when you start talking about the philosophical viewpoint of this, so for example, dispositions, it's very difficult to assess those sorts of things. And so I think a specific challenge would be keeping up with how well the students are continuing on their literacy path. So is that what you mean by that, Kimberly?
Yeah, I think with implementing the framework, you're not really able to say, have I truly ensured that when the students leave, they're going to have this specific disposition? The idea behind, I think just as Kelly said, using the framework is to try to get, to go in with the idea that we're going to help the students develop, well, exhibit these behaviors throughout the class, but that there's no way to guarantee that you'll be able to do that.
Okay, let's see. So you're still using outcomes from standards? Yes, we are, the consistent standards. But for each class, for example, I'll take the outcomes that I see that are developed from the standards, and I'll use the lens of the framework to develop specific class outcomes, if that makes sense. So we start out with the outcomes that we've developed from the standards, and then we view them from the frame for each class. And that was a question from Adrian. Okay, next I've got from Diana. You may have said this, and I'm sorry if I missed it. Have you gotten the faculty involved in reinforcing the ideas of the framework before and after the library session? I usually talk to them about this in a little. I don't specifically mention the framework, but I do talk to them about the philosophy of the framework. So, you know, I talk to them about what sorts of, so for example, the difference in, and I'm going to speak a lot about English 101 and 102 because I'm the instructor for English 101 and 102. So the difference in philosophy there is one is specifically about developing their sense of what a good source is and how they fit into the research and the research conversation and how they are researchers themselves. And then for English 102, you get more into in-depth about how to do research and responsible research and things like that. And so I do talk to the instructors about that beforehand and see what sort of thing they want to focus on. Because it's really up to them and where they are in their classes.
I think there's that. We've also, because Kelly and I have co-taught, we've also incorporated, we've also mentioned some of the ideas through some of the sessions depending on what the class is about. So for instance, the idea that authority is contextual. We've emphasized that in the class, maybe not saying this is a frame, but by emphasizing you want to question where this is coming from. And so we do try to get, luckily the faculty also are coming in those sessions with the same idea of evaluating the sources, if I'm making sense.
Okay. I've lost my track here.
If we on to the discussion as your slide suggests.
Yeah.
Will we hear more about how the framework has influenced your work? or should we hold on to the questions till later? Well, if we move on, when we move on, we actually want to hear about what everyone else is doing, how it's impacting their work. One of the issues with the framework is that it's wonderfully vague, and I say wonderfully vague because you can build it to suit your purposes. But before you can do that, you have to see where you've been. And so we are in the process of looking at where we've been, and we're building from that to meet where the framework is. And so we want to see if you guys have also done the same. How do you decide which frames you use for which classes and which disciplines? And this is something interesting. I'm not sure if you got to read the Fosberg article, Diana. The frames were set up so that they could be used, the framework was set up so it could be used cross-disciplines. And so in terms of disciplinary work, all 6 of the frames should be used in any should be able to be used in any discipline. At the same time, depending on the needs of the instructor for the class, that's how we'll decide which frames we'll try to adapt to the class. Kelly, are you caught up? Am I answering in a way that?
Yeah, that was a great answer. Cool. I don't know if I'm caught up. I'm still looking at chat, but yeah.
Okay. Rebecca would like us to talk a bit more about our specifics to assess the knowledge practices within the frames. How do we assess them, and can we provide a specific example?
Okay.
Kelly, do you?
Yeah. So this depends on the class. A lot of the time, unfortunately, this comes in within the class. This is on individual instructors to understand what's happening while it's happening. Because we are one-shot, it's really difficult to do assessment on how the students are developing within a frame. Like I said, we have talked to instructors sort of informally. We send out emails to see whether they think their students are improving based on whether they've had instruction or not. And we are trying to develop more formal assessment to see whether we can sort of get a handle on whether this is working in a discipline. Specifically in English 101 and 102, because we actually do have a department for English. It's more difficult with the other classes, if that makes sense. And if you have anything to add, Kenya.
No, I think that was perfect. The next question was also about the kinds of assessment we use for the English courses, and that's your field, but I think you just answered that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving beyond the model to our first year, beyond our first year students, we are currently in the process of, as a group, working to develop outcomes over the whole program, not just with our general education courses, but also with the subject librarians, etc., just to align all the outcomes throughout the instruction program.
And just so everyone knows, if you are asking questions of each other, you can send a private chat right above your box. You can send a chat to specific people if you have a question for them rather than us, if that makes sense. Because I'm not sure if some of you are answering each other or are you talking to us specifically. Okay, where are we, Kenya?
Well, Darby says she'd like to hear more framework-specific information. And I'm not sure.
So can they not send private chats? Can we only do that, Kenya?
I'm not sure.
Interesting. Only participants or panelists. Mm. Okay, well, forget that. Sorry.
We do one, Elena says, we do one-shot library training too. We often struggle with assessment. What are some ways you assess learning?
The way we assess learning? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So again, we talk to the instructors. Some of this is informal and some of it's formal. We'll do either an assessment right after the class for students to see, like, for example, pre and post assessment. We've done that before. We've also tried doing it at the beginning of the semester, at the end of the semester, with varying results. So it just depends on the instructor. For example, every instructor here, I know in the program, does it a little differently depending on their area. And it also depends on the course. So
okay, let's see. Have you caught up yet?
Sort of.
Okay. See, and I am agreeing with Darby's statement about speaking more to the framework. We just wanted to, one of the ideas behind this process is that we wanted to engage into this in discussion about how people are using the framework, how people are, because we're using it to try and inform our instruction, again, as a philosophy. But it's also good to hear how you guys are using it. So I'm going to put my email in, my email in the chat so that if there are any questions, and Kelly will also do this. I'm speaking for Kelly, sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
We'll also do the same so that we can get emails about our specific program, but we also want to get to talking about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, if you have specific questions about specific classes, I can answer those questions through email.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see.
Oh, this looks fun. The bottom here. Looks like Heather, she says they've got some exciting results assessing learning via reflective essays. Huh. That's interesting. Oh, by the way, can we, I'm assuming that people can talk with their mics if they want?
Yes.
So if any, I guess if people want to raise a hand or something, if they want to talk, you can also do that. If you have a longer statement than what you can put in chat, I mean.
Librarians are developing library research mini assessments.
Oh, great, Heather, thank you.
And Virginia, I really like that. Mini assignments for faculty.
Oh, that's fun. And we have used sort of quizzes for assessment to students before. For example, putting out a quiz for the end of the semester so that it's just not just post session, but at the end of the semester. And that works pretty well. It works better if they're graded on it, unfortunately.
And Heather, thank you for sending us that article. Oh, participants can't use the mic. Sorry about that, guys.
Why?
But Sheila, one of the things I saw recently is backward design, and I was really interested in that. Can you just share in chat what some of the challenges you had with using backward design was, or were there any challenges with using backward design? Okay, so Diana, you asked, there's a lot of overlap between the way that we teach IL and the way we might change our teaching based on the framework. I personally have changed the way that I teach. It used to be okay, standards, especially with evaluating, knowing how to evaluate information. It was, okay, we're going to do the CARB test, or depending on how you use it, the CRAP test. Excuse my language. But it was pretty much, these are the details you're looking for when you're exploring, when you're evaluating information. How that's changed with using the framework is, while you give them the idea that they're looking for these things, the emphasis changes from whether this information has any value in terms of, does it have value in certain contexts. And so there's a more, you emphasize the context that it was created in and the context in which you may use it in. And so it's changed in terms of the content that you're providing to the students is a bit more robust. Does that make sense?
And someone asked if the chat's going to be saved. I'm assuming it is, but I've been wrong both times I assumed. So I think before I leave, I'm going to go ahead and copy the chat just in case. And that way, if we see any links pop up that people are posting, those will be saved. But I think it will be saved. Great, thank you, Sheila. Looks like Oklahoma State is also doing some backwards design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, one shot's pretty difficult. You know, yeah, it is difficult. What we're trying to do is we're trying to develop one shot over the whole program. So us gen ed teachers are working with, or trying to work with the subject librarians to see whether the discipline specific classes are aligning with us. And the graduate students too. Like we talk to professors about the graduate students to see if they need any help in literacy. Ooh, that's a good question. Has anyone had any success in incorporating scaffolding into the instruction program using the framework? I'd be interested to know that. Yeah, great, Heather, thanks, yeah. Yeah, and rubrics, yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading out loud, I'm sorry. Does anyone have an example of how they determine the student's previous knowledge? Okay, so for example, what we've done, Emily, we've done some pre-tests and post-tests, and sometimes that helps. And we've found that the students are pretty inconsistent in the level they're at.
Another thing that we do is we constantly try to engage the students to help in when we are doing the instruction. So we ask them what they know, like it's on the spot as well, inquiry into, we're not just going to let you sit here and absorb. We want to see, you know, do you know this information? And so trying to incorporate that as well.
What I've noticed with some faculty members, they're really engaged in scholarly communication, and they're really interested in having their students join the research conversation. And I think that if we could have faculty participate more in that way, that it would be a great help. And I haven't figured out quite how to do that yet. It's the individual instructor. But I think that really helps with the students. Okay, thanks, Amy. And Paula, that's great. Yeah, that's interesting, Rebecca. Kenny actually came up with, hey, can you talk about your scoring system when it comes to interesting.
Okay.
Put you on the spot.
So what we've done, and hi Rebecca, what we've done is we've developed a scoring system of just a random numbering system of between 0 and 1 that would give a value to each type of information they may be looking at. And so we get them into groups and have them rank websites that may be relevant to the topics that they're looking at. And that ranking system won't just make them think, okay, this item, while it's good in this area, it's not good in this area. And so it makes them think about what's credible versus what's scholarly. Both the students and the professors seem to get a kick out of that. Is that what you meant, Kelly?
Oh, yeah, that was it. Thanks.
No problem.
Everybody's giving such good links. I'm so excited.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to sit down and just look through this whole thing again. I know I'm missing questions and comments.
And one of the reasons I've been a little quiet is one of the links through the ACRL frame listserv was information on backwards design and how it works. So if you give me a moment, I want to put that link in.
Dan, I know for us, we have not worked the framework into online classrooms yet, so I'm going to let other people answer that. Diana, by colleagues, I guess you mean the other librarians? Okay. I do know for the gen ed teachers, yes. We're all working really hard and we're keeping that in mind. For some of the subject librarians, I haven't talked to all of them about it. We do have a lot of people here, but some of them, of course, are interested in it. But I think it's mainly for gen ed that we're really trying to push this.
It's my hope that we'll be able to expand beyond, and that's also one of the hopes that I think we share with the rest of the team.
I think it could, yes, absolutely. What we're working on right now is just getting students, so we think about it as like a literacy path and developing through the frames. So yeah, anywhere from high school all the way through, you know, postdocs. We're trying to incorporate these things. But it's just, you know, here we've got maybe some communication. We just need to work on that a little more. That's one of our challenges. We've got some holes. Oh, great, Joelle, thanks. And we don't do fully online classes. We do have some flipped classroom sort of things that we do. I don't know, though. Kenya, does Anna work on fully online classes? I get a feeling she does, and I'm just missing that.
Yeah, I believe comp studies are mostly online.
Okay, great.
Almost completely, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any experience with that yet. One of the librarian that covers transfers does comp studies too, so she works a lot online. Yeah, Heather, I totally agree with you. I think the framework for us was sort of a revelation in terms of like the conversation that just ongoing conversation that we have when we talk about literacy. You know, where we are, where the students are, we're all on the same sort of, you know, path. So with the standards, they were, you know, more like check marks. Oh, thanks, Teresa. So Teresa Walker, she's the head of our program here, so she knows better than we do. Thanks. It's kind of weird talking and then having people chat. Let me. It's so weird. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Blackboard Collaborate. I'm more used to being able to share the mic with everybody, you know. I mean, one at a time, but. Do we have librarians here who are embedded? I'd like to ask them what they do with the framework specifically. Yeah, I hear you. And Julia, that's a good question. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, we've got some Blackboard resources that include library instruction, but yeah, those aren't used as much as they should be either. Yeah, we do have that problem. I wonder if other people have problems with grad students having trouble with research and writing. Yeah, all right. I don't know if that's more of a problem now or we're just hearing about it more, but we're definitely hearing about it. Oh, Lord. Internet Explorer, huh? All right. Thank you, Diana. Let's see. Oh, great, Joelle. I wish I could hear you talk about that a little more. Oh, great. Virginia, great. Yeah. Yes, Kathy, instructors do assume grad students know more than they do. We have that problem here. And then the grad students get a little self-conscious about it. Okay, Nicole, thanks. Yeah. I'm just reading chat still, guys. Sorry. Yeah, Elena, one of the problems that I see with grad students is that they're still using some of the same, actually the same general databases too, and they don't really branch out into their discipline, which is kind of disturbing. And so they don't know as much as they should about that. Adrian, okay, I've been trying to figure out if I can turn the microphones on. I've been sort of looking around. I'm not as experienced with this as I am with Collaborate. Thanks, Darby. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, Dan, with the new faculty, I guess that would be better. It's sometimes even difficult for us to have conversations with faculty about their own literacy, information literacy. You know, yeah, it's an issue. Wow, Terry, that's great. I wish we had that much time, yeah, with all graduate students. Yeah, Lauren, it's interesting. We have had some complaints from instructors who, while they assume their students are tech savvy, they sort of complain about them Googling everything, which can be problematic in itself because there are some good things, you know, if you just Google government sites, for example, that's fine. And so the instructors don't even understand that you can Google some things. Let's see. That's true. Students do want immediate results. That's a problem we've been seeing is sort of the drive to do research and then they give up very quickly, I think is an issue because they think maybe it's not out there because they can't find it within 10 seconds. That's why sometimes I talk about using the 10-minute rule. If you can't find it in 10 minutes, ask a librarian. And we try to push that sort of philosophy.
I actually refer to it as a hunt. You know, if you are shopping, for instance, and you're shopping for a bargain, you don't stop after you see the first or second shelf. You sometimes have to keep digging until you find exactly what you're looking for. And that resonates with some of my students as well. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, so it looks like we won't be able to hear everyone.
Well, I actually just got a chat that says we can make people panelists. Do you know how to do that?
No, Eloise would have to make them panelists.
Okay.
But it's muted for attendees.
Oh, do we have anybody that wants to speak? Eloise is saying that she can make someone a panelist. Does everybody know how to, like, if you want to raise your hand, it's right above the text box. The chat box is a little hand, so I can see if you want to talk. Or we can do emails, yeah, that too, but let's see. I'm seeing some check marks, but I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, let's see. All right. I think we're doing pretty good with the chat, though. I mean,
I hate to ask this, but is there anyone who asked a question who didn't feel their question was answered?
Yes, please.
Or anyone stated something and we didn't address it?
Yeah, so because we sort of need to wind up, and I'm sure we missed something. Dan, we have not made a LibGuide strictly on the framework. Has anybody else done that? I'd be interested to see it. Doesn't look like anybody else has done it yet, maybe. I'll have to look later. Check LibGuides.
And then 1 second.
Oh, Nicole, that sounds great. Yeah, and when you actually publish that, could you send me an email? That would be great.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that it's in the context of the critical thinking. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have anybody here, just really quickly, that has a course, like a library course in their program, accredited course? Okay. Have you started integrating framework sorts of things for that? Oh, great. I wish we had a credit course. Okay. I'd like to see how that goes compared to the one-shots. Okay. Yes, Jennifer, that's good. I would like that as well. Oh, great. Yeah. I mean, I'm just assuming assessment's way easier in that sort of context to see whether students are developing. Well, you know, easier. Yeah, Josh, like we said before, we are still using the standards. I'd be interested in to see if anybody's just basing on framework too. Yeah. Yes, Heather, I understand that. Yeah, and Nicole, I think it's more of an individual thing too, depending on the school and the course, because it depends on the students, you know. It's not going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the issue that we're seeing with the framework is that it's a lot more vague. And so developing outcomes is not as, yeah.
What I like about it is that it does have those dispositions, you know, and it's a little more vague, but I think it is more inclusive, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like it as well. I tend to tell people, I think, yes.
Yes, for sure.
Yes. I tend to think of it as giving our students airs, which kind of spells out each of the different frames, each letter from the first of the frames. We're trying to get them, and we also have to behave in the same way. We're trying to get them to realize that information getting, information understanding isn't easy. And so I really like it. I don't know. I think, as you say, Nicole, it's easier with individual classes, but assessment, not so good.
Hey, Kenya. What do you think about doing another 5 minutes? I think we're sort of winding down a little. Is that okay with everybody? If you got some final questions or things to put in the chat? Oh, that sounds really cool, Penny.
That's kind of awesome, Penny.
Yeah.
How's that working? Penny?
She's probably typing.
Oh, sorry.
I can't tell, but she probably is.
I know. I think we've had a lot of good discussion here. It's kind of sweet.
What do you think about this, Kenya? I don't know if this is going to work or how well this is going to work. The transcript is going to be saved for the chat. So if you've commented and other people are asking you questions, if you could go ahead and put your email in the chat. And I know this is going to be a bunch of people, but if you put your email in the chat, maybe we can go through and just, if we had a question about a specific person's comment, we can also email that person. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
And one of the things that I'm also thinking about is I think a lot of the discussion we've had here has been helpful. And I feel as if a lot of this discussion, some of this discussion we're seeing in the ACRL frame, but not most of it. So I'd like to figure out a way that we could continue sharing what we're doing if possible. So.
Yeah, some of you will be getting emails from me. I mean, one of the main reasons we did this is because we wanted to hear from other places to see what you guys were doing. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Yes, Jennifer, I agree. Thanks, Heather. Yeah. Social listserv. It's not all crazy.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Hey, Kenya, do we want to stick around for a little bit?
We'll be here.
Yeah. But thank you guys so much.